let's, give all the listeners kind of an intro as to who you are. You can take as long as you want. I'd really like, obviously, when we talked on the phone, it was pretty clear you had an extensive career, and one that was really, like I said, your journey is super interesting to me. So take us all the way back to where this thing started. Let us then kind of lead us all the way to where you're at now, and what your current capacity is with the direction that you're heading in.
Yeah. So my name is Joe Sawicki, and currently serve as the Director of Sports Medicine at the Shattuck St.Mary School in Faribault, Minnesota. I got started a long time ago. So in high school, I was a football player and a baseball player. I went to a small high school just south of Worcester, Massachusetts, and I was a pretty good football player. I was a pretty good baseball player, and I realized that being 5'8", 200 pounds wasn't going to get me anywhere in football anyway. So I kind of put my energy towards baseball, but suffered a slap lesion in my shoulder trying to turn a double play right before my freshman year started. So that kind of put the skids on my baseball career. So, but anyway, my first week in college, I saw signs looking for a manager for the hockey team. So I went to a guy that I thought was the coach, and asked him if he needed any help. And it turned out it was the head athletic trainer, and this was at Merrimack College in just north of Boston. And it turns out he needed help in the athletic training room. So I got started doing that, and kind of just went hand in hand with what I was studying. I was a bio major looking to do maybe pre-med, and as my college career progressed, Merrimack had started the talks about designing a sports medicine program. So I was really fortunate to have been the first person to graduate with a degree in sports medicine from Merrimack College. So it was a great experience because at that point in time, the rules were a little bit different as far as what student athletic trainers could do, and I had a tremendous amount of freedom. And it allowed me to kind of, make some mistakes and learn from them. Obviously, within good reason, nobody ever got hurt. It wasn't a big deal. But it was good. I mean, I had some experiences that I don't think I would be able to have today. And, so I think I'm better off for that in the long run, which led me to a graduate assistant position at Worcester State University, where I was with as an athletic trainer as well. So that too, small Division III school, really short staff. So they gave us a lot of freedom to do, to kind of, be in charge of our own, systems without having anybody looking over your shoulder. And that was good too. And through those two experiences, I got to meet a lot of the people that, have had a lot of influence in my career. And so after that, I was joking. I spoke with a group of graduate students a couple of weeks ago, and I said, my whole career has kind of just been, being at the right place in the right time. And I was looking for a part-time job doing summer camps, and they turned into a full-time job working at Bridgeton Academy, which is all boys postgraduate school in Western Maine. And so I ended up over, the next 17 years, I ended up spending 15 years there. I left for a couple of years and, thought I knew better about, what I would, prefer to do with my career, and kept coming back to, I really just missed the population that I was working with and the, and the environment that I was in. So I went back, and prior to coming out to Shattuck St. Mary's, I've been here for 6 years. I ended up spending the 13 years prior to that out in Bridgeton. Ultimately, before I left, I ended up with the role of athletic director and director for sports performance. So that was a lot of fun. I got to be in charge of the athletic department there, and and kind of run the show there. And I also got to work with the students in the in the sports performance realm as well. And now here at Shattuck St. Mary's, my job is kind of like a high performance director. I oversee all of what we do for strength and conditioning, as well as I oversee the operation of the athletic training room and the staff that we have here. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of my career in an abridged version. I've had some pretty cool experiences along the way. I got to work with the medical support staff for the 1996 World Junior Hockey Tournament. I've got to be a part of USA Hockey National Development Camp. Got to to do some things, meet some people along the way. That's been really outstanding.
That's a wild ride, Joe. Yeah, I know you'd kind of taken me through that last week actually when we talked on the phone, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, like it sounds like it does take some time to truly get yourself in a position where you are overseeing a vast amount and a different variety of elements that obviously need to take place, and all of the elements and things that need to go into the athlete's life, not just from a technical, tactical perspective or a physical perspective, but also from a psychological perspective, and obviously the nutrition that you had talked about a little bit last week. So if you could kind of take us into just a little bit further into like the way your staff is set up right now, like how many people do you have on staff? How many people do you have on board? It seems like from what you described to me, obviously you take on a large amount of work. But how is that distributed? What is the lay of the land over there at Shattuck St. Mary's?
Yeah, so when I was originally hired here at Shattuck, the role was to come in and be the guy who kind of bridges the gap between athletic training and strength and conditioning. I had obviously had experience in both sides of it, that was kind of the role that I stepped in. It was newly created, and unfortunately, the guy who was running all of the strength and conditioning pieces here went ill, and unfortunately ended up having to leave the program. So it kind of got put more into the day-to-day operations of strength and conditioning, whereas I was basically just going to come in here and make sure that we're doing things right on both sides of the equation. We have, including myself, 4 full-time athletic trainers here. And, so right now we're trying to develop more of a structure that allows me to spend a little bit more time in the weight room, and hopefully develop an internship program here where we can have people come in and be a part of our program, on a college level internship basis, which would allow us to be able to do what we do in the athletic training room, but also kind of make our strength and conditioning program a little bit more robust. We are developing more and more programs here where I think it puts us at the forefront of what, at least at the high school level, is going on in the world of strength and conditioning, with our athlete monitoring and our ability to provide services for our athletes. At least in my realm, I don't know of any other schools like maybe IMG Academy that can do similar to what we're trying to do here. And so that's where we are right now. I cover the training room a few mornings a week, which allows me to spend the bulk of my afternoons up in the weight room running our programs. Right now, I'm in charge of all of the strength and conditioning programs for our sports programs, which is, I should kind of preface that by saying we're not like a normal high school. We don't have the normal like fall sports, winter sports, spring sports, varsity, JV, all of that. Our program is more like the club sports level. So we only have 4 athletic programs here. And that is hockey, soccer, figure skating, and golf. And so basically 300 of our 500 students participate in one of those 4 programs, and they run all year long. So it's not like, there's an off season or a preseason or anything like that. It's kind of, there's in season and there's in season more, there's, the ebbs and flows of the in season are a lot more along the lines of like for lack of a better word, a professional level. So right now I'm overseeing all of the strength and conditioning for all of the programs. So that takes up a big chunk of my time. And so luckily I have a really amazing sports medicine staff here that can control their load without having to worry about, if I have to be a part of it, on a supervisory basis.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to have you get into next, right? Because obviously Shattuck St. Mary's is its own particular situation, and you guys kind of cater to a completely, I don't want to say a different audience, but the target model that you guys have set forth, your philosophy and what you guys have decided to emphasize, as you said, consolidating it down into 4 sports and really identifying what, kind of direction you guys want to head in. And I know when we talked over the phone, you're like, well, how does this stand up against the long-term athlete developmental model kind of thing? And, to me, I think it really depends on what it is that you guys have decided that you want to do. So if you can kind of talk about that, like how are the conversations different within the context of like what you speak and how you talk to the sports medicine staff? And obviously you're overseeing the weight room, and obviously you're dealing with a bunch of sport coaches all the time. How are those conversations a little bit different given the setup that you guys have there, as opposed to the conversations you had back at Bridgeton or any of the other previous experiences you had? Because I'd imagine when, I don't know the exact, I forget, I think you said you get some of those kids over there at a really young age. What, like how do you guys kind of decide on what's needed for each one of those athletes? I know you talk a little bit about, the end goal, right? But how does that end goal different at a place like Shattuck, where there's a little bit more of an emphasized philosophy on one particular sport and your relationship to specifically hockey?
So I think the end goal remains the same, and that was one of the things that I was able to really kind of culture at Bridgeton was, what does that end goal look like? What do we want these athletes to look like as they go into their freshman year? And, so what we were able to do here at Shattuck is kind of reverse engineer it. And you're right. I mean, we get kids, our school goes all the way down to grade 6. So we're getting kids, in our youngest programs, for both hockey and soccer, and I guess, and as well as figure skating, we have kids that are in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So it's got to be intentional in terms of how we want them to proceed through the program. And like I said, ultimately the end goal is fairly similar. The conversations I think are good in terms of, what we want to do as far as, one, keep the kids healthy, because, like you said, this whole model that we have here kind of flies in the face of the long-term athlete development programs out there that say, kids should be playing more than one sport, or they should be doing more activities rather than just their own sport. And, and that's a challenge for sure, because we have to create opportunities for them to undo the work that they do kind of, to create overuse injuries. We have to, kind of supplement the things that they do in their sport a little bit more subtly in terms of, making sure that we're not repeating the same motor patterns and repeating the same muscle activities, so that, we're creating an environment where they do end up getting those overuse injuries. Because, especially when we're talking about kids that are, in the early stages of adolescence, it doesn't take much to start talking about, Osgood-Schlatters disease and Seaver's condition and plantar fasciitis and, all of the snapping hip syndrome and all, like I said, all of those, kind of overuse injuries that we hear about with adolescent athletes. Because a lot of these kids, for sure, our program runs from, and I'll use soccer as an example, because that's kind of our most robust program in terms of what they do for the school. They come in mid-August, start playing games in mid-September. And then, if we go deep into the playoffs, they could be going until like early July, so we have to make sure that what we're doing is, one, keeping them healthy, keeping them on the field, and two, secondarily, in engaging in the sports performance realm, especially when we're talking about the early levels, whereas, with the older levels, we can kind of push the envelope a little bit because their bodies are a little bit more physically mature.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to build off that, I don't know, I probably should have asked you this before we did the podcast, but would it be possible for you to give us a specific example? Because obviously you're in a very unique situation, not only given, like I said, the philosophy of Shattuck St. Mary's, but also your role. And not a lot of, strength and conditioning coaches come from the athletic training background, a sports medicine background, and vice versa, right? So having that advantage, right? Because I would consider that a complete advantage. It seems the way that you are using it is obviously to your advantage, right? What do Can you give us a specific example of like a specific problem that you guys would come across? Say it's like, all right, we have, this group of individuals, this particular team, and we could talk soccer, we could talk hockey, figure skating, golf, whatever you want to go with. The bulk of this team obviously ranges from this age group to this age group. What does that line of communication look like? Like, how does that process take place when it comes to like the sports medicine piece, the strength and conditioning piece, and obviously dealing with the sport coach? Like, how does that evolve? Like, is it a master plan? Is it a blueprint that you guys have all created together? Like, what are some of the specific problems that you guys come across, and how do you provide solutions to those types of things? I mean, I know it's probably, I'm sure you have some that, you're probably dealing with currently, right? If you don't mind, I mean, without having to, go too deep into detail where I'm kind of stepping on toes, but I think that would be interesting for listeners to see, like, what is that process and how does that communication take place? Like, what types of things you talk about not having any sort of overlapping qualities being touched on, whether it be on the ice or in the weight room, whatever the case may be. I think it's in our current society, it's almost deemed, good communication if it's just, hey, I have athlete X, they did this with me today, you should do something along the lines of this. And although that may have to be the case at certain points in time, obviously I think we both agree that that's not necessarily the most efficient way. Given the model that you guys have set up, I bet you have more access to coming up with a more thorough and robust plan heading into the actual season, or, like you said, kind of the year, because there really is no season or off season. So you can just kind of give us an idea of like what that process looks like, how that communication takes place, maybe how you guys have developed sort of your universal language, if you might.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different, obviously, because we talk about like you'd mentioned, kind of at the beginning of the season, kind of laying out a plan. One of the things that I really quickly learned about here is that you can plan all you want, but it really what we do kind of looks a little bit week to week. As far as what we do with sports medicine is we just continually monitor, and we've gotten really, really good at being able to communicate within ourselves, because we're not always the same. Our athletic training room is open from 6 a.m. until, sometimes 7, 8 o'clock at night. And so, we're rotating people through the training room all day long, athletic trainers wise. And so in order for us to be able to have that continuity of care and to be able to kind of look things, to kind of, prevent something that's trending one way, or, something that looks like on a horizon, like, hey, these kids are competing this weekend, or there's a really heavy load of games coming up. So, we need to be, a little bit more proactive with what we're doing in terms of recovery, or, nutrition, or making sure that they're, staying, that we're not overworking them in one way or the other. So if you see something that, you're concerned about, come and tell me in terms of, hey, the kids are really tired. The kids are really complaining that their legs are sore because, I don't know if you've ever worked with, with high school age kids, but one of the things that you find is that they will tell every single person on the campus about something other than the people that will really make a difference in changing it. So I will hear from 14 people that this kid is hurt, except for the kid who's actually hurt. So, it really comes down to, and the sport coaches as well, kind of being on the front side of, if you hear any chatter, or if the kids are kind of low energy, or if we can, push them a little harder this week, then let's talk about ways that we can do that. But at the beginning of the year, we all sit there and go, okay, well, this is what we'd like to accomplish. But at a place like this, again, where we're going and there's no off season, there's really no way that we can plan for what, there's no like, this is the competition phase, and this is the preseason phase, and this is the, maintenance phase. It all kind of meshes together in one way, shape, or form. which is way different than anything that I'd ever dealt with before, So, this is my 6th year here. It legitimately took me 4 years to kind of wrap my head around what that means, because, I'm sitting here going, okay, well, we're going to be working on power this week. And then the kids come back from an 8-hour bus ride to, from Michigan or, somewhere out there, and they're just dragging and they can't do it. And I'm sitting here going, okay, well, now what do I do? So I had to, what I kind of looked at the beginning of this was to create almost like a block system, where at the end of each block, I want to have achieved a certain set of goals, whatever it is, in our in the long-term program that we've put together. We break it down into fall semester, spring semester. So at the end of a fall semester, I will have hoped to have achieved this, and it's different for each age level, because, we get, and it's kind of the same thing at every place, but, one year we have a group of kids that's really super athletic and they can handle this, and you can actually push them a little bit harder. But then the next year you come in and you've got a group of kids that, are a little lower training age that, need a little bit more, little more TLC. And, you might not be able to advance as quickly. So what we did was kind of took the pressure off of trying to achieve something every single week, or to try and achieve something every single workout session, and looked at it long term and said, okay, well, if I want my U14 kids to be able to, control their bodies better, to do the movement prep stuff the way that we want them to do it, then we're going to kind of chip away at it every single workout. And, maybe we won't be able to go super heavy this week, but, maybe we'll be able to do some gallop steps, and we'll be able to do that kind of stuff and make sure that we can do it cleanly. And, if it takes us 20 minutes to do it, then I'm okay with that. And if that's our only workout for the day, then I'm okay with that too. And so, we look at it, and, and I forgot who it was. Maybe Mike Boyle was saying it a couple of weeks ago about, it's a crock pot, not a microwave, so it's, we're trying to slow cook and achieve, 1% better every single day, and that's kind of what I tell the kids, and the coaches are on board with that too, because as long as the kids are getting something out of the workouts, they're not so fatigued that they can't function in their on-field or on-ice training sessions, then it helps them out as well. And for me, we'll kind of subtly put in a lot of, injury prevention stuff, and we'll put in, stuff that, will make them a little bit better, but, kind of on the side, it doesn't appear to be as, maybe as functional as, they might expect in a different training program. And then, like I said, our communication is really good in terms of, the kids are dragging right now, let's change gears, or, we don't have any games this weekend, so let's push them as hard as we have to, because the training sessions will be a little bit lighter, a little bit more technical, so we can go harder in the weight room. And so I think that's the good conversation pieces that we have across the board with all of our coaches, to be able to sit there and go, okay, yep. All right, this is what this week looks like. And so we're going to, advance a little bit more, robustly toward our end goal, or we're going to kind of take it a little bit easier and just kind of, do the technical stuff that maybe doesn't require as much hard, physical activity.
Yeah. Okay. So before I got a couple of things now, and I'm trying to, before I forget. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Just so at the beginning of this answer that you just gave me, you talked about the idea that, well, listen, we can have as much, planning take place as we'd like, but at the end of the day, we know that this is going to be pretty agile, right? The ability to kind of come and go and understand like what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis is going to vary, and we're going to have to make sure that we adjust based off of what has taken place, and we don't necessarily have control over certain variables, right? So I think that's an interest that, like, if we were to really discuss the idea and the concept of periodization, which I think has taken a significant amount of criticism over the years, and even more so, I think lately, as we start to understand how chaotic the game itself is, regardless of the sport, right? And obviously, especially when you work in team sports, and even in a sport such as figure skating, where there may be even a little bit more control, given it's a little bit more of an individualized sport, you'd probably sit here and tell me, which correct me if I'm wrong, there's as much chaos in that sport as there is in any other sport. So, or unpredictability, I guess you could say, right? So I think those types of things are super important, and I appreciate that type of setup, right, where it's, it's a little bit more of a guideline, and we're going to make the adjustments. And the second thing you touched, you mentioned the gallop step. So now it kind of got my mind going on. Obviously, you have some weight room aspects that take place. You're going to take care of some of the things in the prehab rehab perspective, but also when we talk about the gallop step, like what does that off ice preparation look like for, and in your philosophy on that off ice preparation for some of these hockey and figure skating athletes, and even some of the soccer athletes, in terms of not even talking weight room, just, pure like sprint and overall sprint preparation, and we talk about plyometric activity, power speed drills, things like that. Like, is that something that you guys truly emphasize there? Like, what does the movement quality look like? And not even talking, the barbell, what is?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think I approach it pretty much like I would any other sport. Obviously we want to try and keep the movements as clean as possible. So, so we're continuously drilling that. And then, within reason, if you've ever worked with hockey players, that hockey players don't necessarily run really well. It's kind of counterintuitive to the motion that they use on the ice. However, there's bundles and bundles of research that show that, the faster you move off the ice, the faster you move on the ice. So, so it's obviously, it's a piece that takes pretty high priority for our program, because, we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for them. Now, that being said, not everybody it can just jump right off the ice, run a flawless, let's say 30-yard sprint and, and be really, really good at it, So, we do a lot of sprint mechanic stuff. We do a lot of track drills. We do a lot of stuff that, breaks down those types of movements, just because, if we can get better at that, then, one being, A plus B equals C, then, then C equals success on the ice, so, our movement quality stuff, with everything that we do, especially with our youngest groups, our first block is basically just all technique, we'll go really super light on all of our exercises. And we've got some pretty strong kids, and, sometimes it takes a little bit of, pride for us to have those conversations with them to say, hey, guess what? I know that you're really strong and you can lift this much weight, but you're not doing it really well. So let's kind of deload a little bit of that, make sure that you're doing it right. And we're going to take the next couple of weeks to make sure that happens. The same thing happens with our sprint work, with our younger kids too. We want to make sure that they can hold that single leg stance, and they can do, 1 foot hops with an iso hold, and, laterally, forward, diagonally, all those directions. So we try to create as much diversity in their programming as possible. So then that way, again, as they get a little bit older and they've been through our program for a couple of years, we don't have to spend as much time on that, because we know that they've kind of gone through the program over the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great insight there. I appreciate that. I have worked with high school athletes in the past, and the one thing, especially specifically hockey high school athletes, is not only do they have some, I don't want to say troubles moving off the ice, but obviously, like you said, it's a completely counterintuitive movement to whatever they do on the ice. That the fine motor skill that is skating is definitely one that requires a specific skill set. One thing I also noticed is that they love to play basketball, and it's probably the most dangerous thing for any of them to do. They always want to play basketball, and it would always end up in like, all right, this is just getting dangerous. You need, like, the worse you are at the sport of basketball, the more dangerous it's gonna be for everybody involved. It just, I'm finding that I've been playing a lot of soccer lately, and obviously, like, we're a bunch of meatheads, and it's like, all right, the worse we are at the sport, the more dangerous it becomes for everyone involved. So it's just, like, we should just probably not do this, right? So, but building off of that, so you also said something that I thought was interesting. I'm not sure the exact word you used, but you kind of said, well, if we don't have a game on the weekend, we may actually be able to push them as far as we need to, not necessarily as far as we can or as far as we want to, right? Because the whole, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So what is that? What did you mean by that when you talk about like, okay, well, we know what we have here, but just because there's no game doesn't necessarily mean, right? Is that kind of the direction that you're going with that?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think it really boils down to volume. Whether it's the amount of reps, the amount of sets, the amount of load. This is something that I've been kind of working through. I've talked to a lot of people recently about it, and it's something that I've been kind of working through in my own mind as well over the last couple of months in terms of the amount of velocity-based training that we're doing off of. I'll use hockey as an example, off of the ice. With the amount of games that we'll play, and I'll take our boys prep hockey team this week as an example, right? So typically what we'll do is play one game during the week and then two games on the weekend. So it's usually like a Wednesday and either Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. So that being the case, we know what we can do on, in our typical workout days for that group are they have team workouts on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then they can optional weight room stuff on Mondays and Wednesdays. So, granted, if they're playing on Wednesday, then generally nobody's doing it unless it's kind of like a little bit of flush work or they're just doing a little bit of mobility work on a Wednesday. Our Tuesdays, we would typically do a little bit more velocity-based training just because we want to kind of, get their energy system primed without overloading their physiological system with, a lot of heavy weights. Where on Thursday, maybe we would do that because of the, the minutes that some of the kids play versus others, and, and the amount of work that they do leading up into the weekend. So this week, as an example, our boys prep hockey team doesn't have a game on Wednesday, but they have a pretty heavy load on the weekend. They're playing in a big invitational tournament. So we know that, today is an example, we'll be able to go pretty heavy with them. We'll be able to go heavy lower body because, we know that they'll have a little bit of time to recover before they have to worry about playing. So maybe Thursday will be a little bit more velocity-based training stuff that's not, or, technical, a little bit more, single leg work, or, maybe a little bit of, higher reps, lower volume type thing. And, the key for us is just to be able to manipulate the load volume wise, weight wise, so that we're not, we're playing within the schedule that we have based on the amount of games that they have on the weekend. Soccer as an example right now, just our older soccer programs just finished their fall season. So we know that we can go heavy on them because they don't have any games this weekend, whereas, if we knew that they were having, let's say that they had to travel to St. Louis and they had a Friday travel day, they were going to play on Saturday. And then, it's probably about 7 or 8 hours away from here, so that you have to contend with the, the fatigue of just travel as well. So we know that, maybe early in the week, we can go a little bit heavier with them. And then later in the week, it's just kind of, maintenance stuff, a little bit of, kind of priming the nervous system, but not overloading it so that they'll be fresh going into the weekend. So that's really the challenge working here because, again, every week is different. And then, throw in all of the challenges that we're dealing with right now with COVID. And, last week we were supposed to have, 6 teams playing hockey games last week. We ended up having 1. And that was, and that game got canceled on the last, at the last minute because of our opponent. So, but on a normal typical week, in a normal typical year, that's kind of the way that we manipulate the load and the volume in terms of the amount of work that the kids do total over the course of the week.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's always travel. And so you mentioned, a couple of these travel, the way that these guys travel. What can you just explain that really quickly? Like, are we talking St. Louis, or like what? How far are these guys going? And some
Yeah.
of these kids, like, what's the travel like for some of these kids?
So our teams are basically national. And I mean, we will play the league that we play in for soccer. It used to be the U.S. Soccer Development Academy. Now I think since it's been taken over by MLS, I think it's called like MLS Next, which is the same thing. But the region that we play in stretches from from Indiana to the east, down to St. Louis and Kansas City and Omaha, and then so everywhere in between. That's we travel a lot for our programs. Our hockey programs play anywhere and everywhere. I mean, we'll travel to Detroit, we'll travel down to Dallas, we'll play try to get out east once a year, whether it's in Boston or northern, in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey. Play a lot in Chicago, all the way down to St. Louis and in Omaha. And so, that's another piece of it too. Do we go hard on a team on a Thursday, knowing that on Friday they've got to drive, 10 hours to Detroit, stay overnight, play, 2 games on Saturday, 1 game on Sunday, and then drive another 10 hours back. So, those are, again, pieces that, on a normal high school, you don't have to worry about that. Even some normal colleges, you're playing closer opponents than that. And so, those are challenges that we have with all of our programs. I mean, our golf program, even, they'll go to Arizona and play a tournament for the weekend, and go to Florida, go to Texas, go to Georgia, so those are pieces that, that we have to take into account in terms of volume and overload and, working on stress and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely an obstacle that I think a lot of people don't really have to deal with. Like you said, even at the collegiate level, and depending on the sport that you're working with, how often that travel may be. Obviously, for football, it's kind of nice. You only travel once a week, right? Mm-hmm. And that's if you have an away game. So yeah, that's super interesting. How do the kids typically respond to that? Is that something that they're just kind of used to? Because obviously, I would assume, like, given the fact that these kids have made the decision and the parents have made the decision that this is the route that their son or daughter is going to go when it comes to actually, identifying within a particular sport, that is it something that they're used to? Is it something that they kind of expected to be a part of?
Yeah. I mean, most of our kids come from systems where, that's kind of the way that it would be, even if they had, even if they were going to stay where they were. Some of them, it's actually even a better situation because, we get a kid from, let's say, as an example, we've got a girl from Louisiana on our hockey team who had to either, drive or fly to St. Louis or to Phoenix just to play home games. So, I mean, having them here, it's it's actually a little bit more, we can control the environment a little bit better because, we're able to, we're able to, kind of determine schedule wise how that's all going to work out best for us. So one team might travel to Detroit one weekend and then maybe have the next week off, or play, 1 or 2 home games the following weekend. So they've got some time to kind of get themselves reset during the week. So, and that, again, that's across the board. I mean, we're very, very intentional about developing our schedules so that we're not just constantly just road warriors where it's just, the kids are dragging, but, that they still have to pull it together to play, 3 games against, one of the top teams in the country in St. Louis, because that's where they need to be. So.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. That is interesting. That's got to be, that's good. I mean, it seems like obviously you guys are doing the right thing by trying to take into account not just the physical stress that's taking place throughout the practice day and throughout the game, but also all of the, psychological stress that comes with the health and nutrition of the athlete when it comes to food, and obviously what does food look like when you guys are actually traveling, and how does the nutrition take place, and then obviously the psychological stress of the travel and the stress that can place on the athlete. So it just seems like a little more holistic approach here, which is pretty cool. Going back to something that you mentioned earlier, I was going back to some of their off-ice sprint work. I know that you had mentioned that the idea would be, right, and this is something that I kind of always believed as well when we were working with athletes off the ice, specifically hockey athletes, is that, well, if I give them the opportunity to increase their speed and their outputs and those qualities off the ice, the hope is that they would transfer to the ice. And given the fact that there is this motor skill of skating involved, that maybe that would take away a little bit of the sort of access that we have to that same output that we developed off the ice once they got on the ice. But it would still maybe, you know, if I can raise the ceiling in some respects, right, that would give me an opportunity to better express that on the ice. For one question, is that your line of thinking where you believe, okay, well, I'm going to give them an opportunity to increase the quality off the ice, and the hope is that it'll transfer on the ice? Or do you think that the skill of skating is such a fine motor skill that and obviously the sport of hockey is one that, you know, reaching higher speeds on the ice, it's typically more of an excel-based sport. And obviously when we talk about spacing and spatial awareness, and, you know, I've seen a ton of hockey players who really aren't the fastest, but their strategic skill and their technical abilities, once again, like they make up for the lack of speed, or they actually may even be perceived to be fast on the ice because of, you know, where they kind of find themselves in space and all those types of things. So I guess my question is, in a roundabout way, do you guys have ways of identifying whether you feel that this off-ice work is actually transferring to some of the on-ice work outside of just a simple eye test, or the sport coach saying, wow, he looks faster, right? Like, or is there some way that you guys kind of quantify that? And if so, you know, what do those conversations kind of look like between yourself and the sport coach when it comes to evaluating whether those qualities are actually taking place?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the first part of your question.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of loaded you up there.
No, it's good. No, there's a lot, and this will be good. So to answer your first question about on versus off ice, you know, crossover. I think that there is some, and I think that, you know, I think it's worthwhile to do it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, skating itself is a tremendously technical endeavor, you know, for lack of a better word. I mean, you know, to be able to skate is one thing. You know, to be able to skate really, really well is a totally different thing. And I mean, you know, there are people that spend, you know, thousands of dollars and tons of hours trying to become a better skater. You know, I can't control that, you know, so I can only do what I can do. So the work that we do off of the ice, again, you know, it is with the end goal in mind that they will have, even if it's, you know, let's say that it's at most a 30% benefit of, you know, that we can do off of the ice versus, you know, on the ice. One, if it makes them 30% better, that's huge in my opinion anyway. Two, if we're creating an environment that makes them a better athlete, that creates an opportunity for them to be able to, you know, to have a crossover effect of, you know, understanding what acceleration is and how to do it. You know, being able to slow yourself down and control yourself in a deceleration phase, you know, because that's one of the things I think that, you know, we talk about all the time, and you hear it all the time, you know, stop on pucks, you know, starts and stops are really super important. Well, you know, if we're teaching deceleration mechanics and we're teaching them how to get into good center of gravity and we're teaching them how to control their body, you know, I call that, you know, a victory as well. So, I mean, there's little pieces that I think add up to, you know, opportunities for them to have that crossover. Now, we don't currently have any measures that we do quantitatively to do that. You know, we're looking into opportunities for that now. I mean, one of the great things about working at a place like this is that, you know, we have people that are, you know, very willing to help out. And so we've been exploring, you know, athlete monitoring systems over the past couple of years and trying to figure out if we really want to do that. You know, I mean, if we want to, and we have the capacity to be able to do it in a manner that's worthwhile, and not just to say, oh yeah, well, you know, we have the catapult system and we've got tons and tons of data, but we really don't know what to do with it, you know. So you know, and that's part of it. I think the next evolution of our program is to be able to do that kind of work and, you know, be able to have it so that it is meaningful and that it has you know, an applicable nature to it. So instead of just, you know, again, we're going to keep up with the Joneses and just do what they do because, they have this, and but them too. I mean, do they use it for the manner in which they've kind of sought out for it? So basically right now we're using it kind of as the eye test. That being said, I mean, I think that we have a staff here that is extremely strong. I mean, these are guys that have coached at the college level, at the pro level, that have been, pro and amateur scouts, that have, done everything that, you could probably do in the hockey world. So to sit there and go, wow, this kid has really picked up a step. I mean, what we're doing is really, really means something. Or, and we've created this whole player development program, as kind of a quantitative measure to kind of be able to show the kids and the parents that, what you're seeing on the ice is a result of the work that they're doing off of the ice. And, and so, yeah, I mean, we're not doing it quantitatively, but I think that what we're measuring, has some teeth to it. It's not just somebody, kind of off the street going, wow, he looks really fast compared to where he was before. It's, right. It's a big picture type thing. And again, I'd love to be able to get us to the next level. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen. So that we can have some data that kind of backs it up, saying that, yeah, I mean, not only does he look good off of the ice, but he's moving faster than he did in the fall. He's changing directions way more effectively than he did before. His ability to absorb force and redirect force is way better than it was before. So obviously, there's some meat behind what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you talk about, the whole just having GPS or just having some form of, tracking system just to say that you have it, right? I'm of the mindset that it's kind of like, lipstick on a pig kind of thing, where it's like, you can have as much, all this technology as you'd like, and there's plenty of it out there to go around for sure. And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, but obviously if you don't have a robust model or some sort of philosophy that you guys are basing any of your decision making off of, it's kind of just like, yeah, we just have this stuff, we track it, we don't do anything with it. It's not solving any of our problems. And if it's not an answer to any of the constraints that you have, then it's really useless. And it's just kind of a waste of money, which probably could be better spent on maybe getting you some extra staff members or somebody who could actually help.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, exactly.
Is that a nice plug for you right there? But I think that's true. And I also think that, the reality is, if your coaches are coming to you and saying, well, Joe, it seems like, our player has picked up a step, or they've actually got a little bit more pop, or whatever, phrases that we hear out there. Typically, right, whether good or bad, like the lack or, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to like technical and tactical abilities, typically when they have pretty solid foundation, they understand what's going on the ice, and the players feel pretty good about themselves, they're able to better express the physical qualities that they have. And obviously on the flip side, and the unfortunate side for strength and conditioning coaches, is sometimes when those technical and tactical abilities are lacking, there's a little bit more of a delayed response to things, and there's a hesitancy, and the coach will kind of look at it, and it kind of comes out in the physical as well, where it's like, oh, this player looks slow, and it's really not a physical issue, right? So again, that's one of those things that you say, well, like, what, GPS isn't measuring any of that stuff, so I don't really know how that's, what that's doing for me. But that is interesting, and I do believe, I know you're a little hesitant there when you're talking about the idea of, the conversations you have, and whether the eye test is valid or not. But if you're working with a group of individuals who understand the specific qualities that you guys have set out to develop, and then you have some, even if the measurement, in my opinion, if the measurement is you guys all having one universal language as far as like what you all think about, or how you all describe the word speed, or how you all describe the word power, right? Like if you have those types of things, you can work without, any sort of quantitative data, just be able to try to say, hey, at least we're moving in the direction that we'd like to move in, right? Mm-hmm. We have a little bit more of an assessment that can be based off of specific qualities and specific stimulus that we're trying to provide to the athlete. And if we feel like we're heading in that direction, we're getting the good feedback that we're looking for, and we're all on the same page as how we go about doing it, again, the the quantitative guys out there would probably smash me for saying this, but I do feel you can at least get like close to feel comfortable about what it is that you are doing, right? Given the fact that you may not have that technology available to you, and I think you kind of mentioned it too with some of the things. Like I don't know how you guys are, as far as that's something we can go into, but what you guys do in terms of whether you have any influence as far as like practice structure, if you have any interest in that kind of stuff, as well when it comes to I was at Quinnipiac with with B, and obviously when I was working in prep school, high school hockey with my mentor, it was a little bit more of a on ice influence as far as like structuring themes and specific qualities that wanted to be developed, obviously because we see the qualities that we want to develop off the ice, but the reality is that qualities are everywhere, right? And especially on the ice. So why would practice not be structured and planned out in the same context of the way that you would structure or plan on any sort of training session, right? As far as, volume training, intensity, density, yada, yada, right? So you have specific qualities that like some days you guys have a little more velocity-based emphasis in the weight room, those types of things. So maybe there's a spot for you guys. Do you guys do those types of things when you discuss the specific qualities or the emphasis of certain practices and how you kind of want to align those things?
We do that a little bit more with soccer than we do with hockey. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous as far as hockey goes. I mean, I coached my son's team going, as he was growing up, and and I've been around the game long enough to know, what the drills are named and what they look like and so on and so forth. But, I'm more than happy to, let the people who know better than me make the decisions that, that are going to ultimately, that are ultimately going to outcome the teams that they're coaching. Right. And I don't want to be, I don't want to be the guy that interjects, or I don't want to be the guy that says, hey, you should try this or that. I've got enough on my plate without having to, to worry about, the minutia of that kind of stuff, and we're not in a place where, again, I remember hearing a talk a couple of years ago by Catapult that, one of the strength coaches at the college level was actually sitting with the coach to determine, each of the drills that they added into a program for the day, so that at the end of the day, it would add up to a certain, at the end of the week, it would add up to a certain workload level. Here's the beauty of what we do at the age level that we have right now is that, we're dealing with a really, really resilient population. So I mean, and there's an art to dealing with that to try and determine how much a kid can take, or where the threshold is, and maybe some of these kids had thought that their threshold was at a certain place, but then when they you kind of push them a little bit, and you kind of extend beyond that threshold, there's almost like an epiphany of, wow, yeah, I can work a little bit harder, and and I can do a little bit more than I thought I was doing. So there's like I said, there's a subtle art to being able to determine what exactly what we're doing and how it's going to affect, and honestly, we kind of have to hit the middle of the bell-shaped curve as well, too. There are going to be some kids that you're going to leave that workout going, man, I wish that we had done a little bit more. And there are going to be some kids that are dragging themselves out of the weight room going, I can't believe that I did all of that. And so, so what we do, on the ice as far as hockey goes, it's like, again, it's a really, it's more of like a conversation of, hey, what I'm seeing out on the ice right now, these kids, we can't push them that hard today. Can you kind of take it easy on them? And, and so that's, I think, a little bit more of the, the kind of give and take that we have as far as the program goes. And like I said, our coaches are top notch. So, for me to sit there and go, hey, this guy, this is his first job, he doesn't know what he's talking about type thing. And these kids can go way harder than that. I fully trust what our coaches are saying in terms of, we can push them a little bit harder, or we have to kind of hold back on the reins a little bit and, kind of take our foot off the gas. So, but we do have that conversation with soccer a little bit more, to kind of get back to the original question, in terms of, well, we're trying to accomplish this as our training block for the next couple of weeks. If we can kind of avoid doing, a lot of hamstring work, or if we can avoid doing, a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit a little bit less volume with, with our lower body push exercises, that way, we can get a little bit more kind of, we can get a little bit more product out of what we're trying to do out on the field. So that, and like I said, and that's a conversation too, where, again, I know enough to be dangerous about soccer, but the way that these guys, see the game here is way beyond my capacity. So it's like, okay, I'm going to trust what you guys are doing, but at the same time, I hope that you guys trust what I'm doing in terms of, I'm not going to put you guys in a position where you're going to be compromised, or, I'm not going to put your kids in a position where they're going to be dragging tomorrow, where your practice is going to be garbage and you're going to have to sit there and kind of recreate it. So, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it is very much an art to try and develop programming that will, satisfy what we're trying to do without having to, compromise what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's interesting though, the hockey coaches will actually let you know that, hey, yeah, these guys are they're dragging a little bit today. Maybe we shouldn't play, because usually it's you get off the ice along the lines of, oh yeah, they look sluggish on the ice, so they look slow out there. You need to push them even harder, make them feel your pain, right? So that's actually actually totally different than the feedback that you normally get from the sport coach. So that's pretty interesting. We got a couple more minutes. Do you have a couple more minutes, Joe, or you got to run?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
You got to come. Okay, so I'm supposed to follow an actual prompt that Andy provides for me. But this conversation kind of took off, so I was like, all right, well, I got to get back to some of the questions that I know he probably wants me to cover. But and this kind of goes in line, like, as far as your coaching philosophy, right? You have a specific coaching style that's probably been developed on your own, based off of your own traits, right? So if you could talk a little about your coaching style. How you kind of approach this whole art that we've been talking about, and then obviously some of your influences. It could be professional, personal, guys that you don't necessarily know personally, but you've read their books or whatever, or it could be, people that some mentors you learn from. Like, how did that kind of coaching style come about?
So yeah, well, that's a really deep question. So
yeah, sorry, say the best for last.
So. Well, so it's, but it's, it's interesting, because, my first job was basically, you have a little bit of background in strength and conditioning. We want you to create a program for us. And, at the time, my background in strength and conditioning was that was in quotation marks, background in strength and conditioning. Cause I mean, I had worked, I'd worked a year while I was in grad school as like a fitness instructor at a health club. And I had, limited strength and conditioning because we didn't have a strength coach when I was in college. So the head AT was kind of the de facto strength coach. So a lot of the times he'd kind of just hand me a workout and say, here, go run this for the guys. And so, I knew enough because of my own, working out when I was, growing up. So, I knew what a deadlift looked like, and I knew what a one-arm dumbbell row looked like. But beyond that, it was a lot of trial and error. And honestly, my first couple of years working at Bridgeton, I made a lot of mistakes, but the beauty of it was that kind of like that, mid to late 90s, I would say that was kind of like the golden age of strength and conditioning in terms of, what you had access to. And I mean, guys that would come for those, those early Perform Better clinics, I was reading an article about, from Mike Potenza a couple of weeks ago about, one of the early Perform Better clinics. And I think I was probably at the same one that he was describing. Cause I remember, you had access to, Vern Gambetta and, Juan Carlos Santana, Michael Clark, Mark Verstegen, Mike Boyle, and those guys would be in town like, every couple of months. So, we'd always be, coming out of that going, man, that I got to go out and try this. And, and the beauty of working at Bridgeton was it was only a 1-year program. So new kids come in every single year. I could do something completely different from 1 year to the next, and nobody would know any different, so that was really, really, that was really good for me as a young coach, because I could make mistakes and nobody would know any better. It wasn't like the kids would come in the next year and be like, I thought we were doing this. And, like, no, I don't, you have no idea how bad that was for you. And I didn't know any better. So, that kind of really formulated the way that I kind of developed my own coaching style. And then the other part of it too is, for 8 years, I worked as a classroom teacher too, so, I mean, I was teaching, A&P, I was teaching math, I was teaching exercise phys. And so, I think I took a lot of those same skills and, kind of transferred it into the weight room. So I kind of look at myself as, and it's funny, I mean, when I was back at Bridgeton, our head football coach used to introduce himself by saying, because he was also a math teacher as well. And he would introduce himself saying, I teach football, but I coach math. And, and that's kind of the way that I look at it and go, okay, I'm and when I'm in the weight room, I'm a teacher, I'm not a coach. I want to be able to make sure that, I kind of help make things kind of help these kids kind of develop their own, their own way through this. And, so that's kind of the way that I approach it, is more along the lines of, I'm going to be there to kind of guide them, but I'm not going to be there, micromanaging everything that they do. So I think that ultimately at the end of the day, the athletes kind of have a little bit more ownership over the way that they learn how to do the exercises. Or they, we start out each session saying, this is our lesson plan today. This is what we're trying to achieve at the end of this. We're trying to achieve, single leg lower body power. We're trying to achieve work in the, in the frontal plane, and this is how we're going to do it. And so by the end of this, you guys will have an understanding of what the difference is between the transverse and the frontal plane is. You're going to understand the difference between doing, a one leg rear foot elevated squat with dumbbells and how that feels versus doing it with the safety bar, So, I mean, I think that, it ultimately benefits me as a strength coach, because as they get a little bit older, I can kind of take some of the control away from myself and give it to them and say, all right, you guys have achieved this. You understand why we're doing it. You know the exercises. You're okay with the form. It's all, you can do this. You don't need me to be looking over your shoulder to say, no, your feet need to be this way, or your shoulders need to be here. Or, and I think ultimately they're better off for it in the long run.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end this thing, because I think that you basically just touched on the idea of creating ownership for athletes over their own training, right? Giving them the opportunity to understand, to learn, to be able to potentially at some point, not necessarily become a coach, but have more ownership over the lifestyle choices that they make in their life and how they approach all of these choices as well, from a technical perspective, from a strategical perspective. So I think it sounds like you're doing a great job over there, obviously, and like the time is up. I'm supposed to keep this to an hour, but is there anything else that you want to add, before we get off here? Any sort of plug where people can find you? If you got social media or anything like that. Anything else that you want to sort of do or say to put Shattuck St. Mary's on the map? Whatever you need to do here is your time.
Yeah. I mean, it's really easy. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested in, in talking about it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be about hockey or soccer or whatever. Our website is ssmathletics.com. And I am available on all different social media platforms. My Twitter is JZ_Sawicki. And our Instagram page is at SSM's Sports Med. And, we're putting stuff up there pretty regularly. And and I mean, although I was just finished up my term as the chair of the NSCA Ice Hockey Special Interest Group. We still post quite a bit of content up on that on the NSCA Hockey SIG Facebook page. And I mean, I'm all around, so you can find me on the website for my email address, and or you can just DM me on Twitter or on Instagram, and yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great stuff. I'm sorry, one last question. Is it? I know you had mentioned last week that you guys are pretty heavily involved with USA Hockey and some other higher elevation? Because obviously you guys are going to eventually, I don't know what the specific number was, but you're going to send a lot of kids to the NHL, and there's a certain percentage of your players who are obviously there for a reason. Is that stressful at all at times? Is that something that is that any sort of outside influences that you kind of need to adhere to at times?
I don't necessarily need to. I don't deal with that as much, I think, as as the kids do and some of the coaches do. Yeah, I mean, so I was kind of trying to figure it out yesterday. In the 6 years that I've been here, we've had 22 of our kids drafted in the NHL draft, and we just had 4 drafted in this last one. We had 5 alums play on the women's side in the last Olympics, 4 on the U.S. and 1 for Canada. Yeah, I mean, we do a lot with those organizations because it's kind of a it's kind of a homogenous relationship as far as what they can do to help us, and then what obviously we can do to help them as well. I mean, we kind of market ourselves as the best youth development program in all of hockey, and I think that what we're doing is helping those programs get better too. So the communication that I have with the guys at USA Hockey is more along the lines of, hey, you know what? You tell me what we can do for you. I mean, we're going to ultimately help you guys succeed in the long run. And so, if we can get them started at the U14 level, then yeah, we're going to do whatever we can to to kind of help make those organizations better. And I mean, I don't just kind of relegate that to USA Hockey. I mean, that's kind of the same conversation that we have with with schools at the Division I level, at the at the junior hockey level. So it's constant conversation with these people in terms of, what, I want to know what you guys are doing, because I want to make sure that our kids get better at what you need them to do. And and I mean, and it's really satisfying for me, to kind of put a cap on all of this. Really satisfying to me to have these coaches reach out to me, later on down the line, or whether it's it's somebody for USA Hockey or Hockey Canada or what have you, and say to us, these kids are so easy to work with. They know what we're asking them to do. They understand why we're trying to do it. The language that they speak is the same language that we speak. So it's like a seamless transition to come in and be a part of our program, and then we know that, having been a product of this program, that they're going to be the hardest working kids out on the ice. They're going to be the kids that are the leaders off of the ice, that they're going to be the kids that, that are going to be the pillars that we build our program on. And, and that's, yeah. I mean, that's a feather in the hat right there,
That is the perfect way to end the podcast. That's a great way to put it, though. That's fascinating stuff. Seriously, though. Obviously, a compliment to you, Joe. Obviously, you're doing a great job of making sure that you're taking a look at what are they going to be asked to do, what are the specific tasks that these guys at the higher levels are going to expect from these players, and let's just make sure that we prepare them for that. So that's awesome stuff. I really appreciate your time, Joe, and I wish you guys the best of luck. We're going to keep in touch, obviously. I'll go follow those Instagram pages, and I'll shoot you a text a little bit after this. But really, really great stuff. I really appreciate your time today, and we wish you guys the best of luck over there.
Thanks a lot. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Stay safe, Joe. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.